Hi and welcome to A Drummer's Guide to, the podcast all about things that it takes to be a professional musician aside from actually playing your instrument. My name is Emily Dolan Davis. I am a drummer and have been since 1999, professional since 2008 and helping others reach their professional goals since 2018, and that is why we're here today. So I'd like to start with a shout out to a lovely Patreon member, the wonderful guitarist that is known as Phil G. Just Phil G. Phil's been around for a long time. It feels like we've been chatting for a long time, but I just wanted to say a personal shout out and thank you to you, Phil, for supporting this podcast. If you're someone that's listening and wants to also support this podcast, you can over at patreon.com/EmilyDrums. Okay, so on with the episode. Today, I would like to talk about a very specific subject that was one of my students asked me to talk on. One of my fantastic students. Like, when I say I'm so lucky with the people that I get to coach. And this guy, he's been with me for, I feel like it's over 2 years now. Probably longer, yeah. The lovely Louis Morehouse, he is a fantastic keys player, producer, drummer, like just general human. He's just awesome. I've got so much time for Louis. We like I say, we've been working together for a good couple of years, and just seeing his progress has been everything to me. So, hey Louis, I know that you're listening. It's probably Saturday morning right now and you're eating your breakfast, so how you doing? But we were talking on his last call about an opportunity that has come up for him, basically, where he's now going to be playing his first ever arena show, which is so exciting. Like, this call that I had with him, it must have been 2 weeks ago now, it was just one of those calls where it was one thing after another of amazing news. Like, he is just so proactive and like he's so good at what he does, and it was just one of those joyous things. And towards the very end he went, oh, and by the way, I've got my first arena show. I was like, dude, how are you only telling me now when we're like 50 minutes into our call right now? He's so funny, he cracks me up. But anyway, but he was saying that it might be worth doing an episode about what to expect in rehearsals when it comes to doing bigger shows, like arena shows with production. And I thought, yeah, great idea. I love having tangible examples of things to talk about so that I can really help in a more direct way. I suppose, like getting into the minutiae that is to do with the individual gigs that people are doing. So this one in particular, like I say, it's an arena show. It's a multi-artist lineup. There's a house band. So there's all that going into the situation. But I just thought, let me talk on what to expect from rehearsals. What he also wanted to know about specifically was, ages ago in an episode, I spoke about my heated lunchbox, and he was like, dude, you never expanded on that. And I was like, all right, I'll use this as an excuse, because heated lunchbox is a whole thing. This is actually the reason I want to do this episode. It's nothing to do with rehearsals. But no, anyway. So let's talk about rehearsals for specifically bigger shows, should we say, because although there's a lot of crossover between if you're doing, say, a covers gig or a smaller gig in a pub or a bar or whatever else, and arena shows or bigger shows or festivals or whatever, yes, there is, or tours, there is crossover, but there are some differences, definitely. And it depends on the size of artist that you're working with, the budget that they have, the size of the production, all these things. So I will talk sort of across different sizes, should we say, of show, but it will be on the upper end of my experience, at least, because obviously I've had experiences with multiple different level artists and situations and all that sort of stuff. So let's start with pre-rehearsal. So forget about the actual rehearsals, we'll get to that. But let's talk about what needs to be done from your side of things. So the first thing, obviously, I always talk about this, the material. Know the material inside and out. It is so important. And something that needs to go along with this, and maybe even needs to happen before you start rehearsing the material, is, well, of course it should, because this is how you should be getting your material, is to be in touch with the musical director. basically, or whoever's running the show, as it were, to make sure that not only do you have the correct versions of songs, because that is a thing, because it could be a version that's off the artist's album, it could be off of a live album, or just a random live show that they have the multi-tracks of that they want to send you because they like the arrangement. Maybe there was a band before and they want to do it a certain way, all this sort of stuff. Sorry, it's so warm in here today that my ring, I was like, I feel like I'm constricted. Anyway, so yeah, make sure that you have the correct material for the gig, the correct songs. Now, sometimes not all of the songs will be 100% confirmed yet, because there will always be liaising going on between management, the artist, the music director, or whoever's in the band. So it is an ongoing process. It won't be a static thing always. Sometimes yes, but rarely in my experience. Like, there's always a conversation going on in the background. So things can change. Material can come in very last minute. That's where it's very useful to have a system in place within yourself that you know that you can learn songs quickly. If you get one the night before rehearsals, you can learn it to a point that you can play it through. Obviously, it doesn't need to be perfect. That's what rehearsals are for, but you give yourself the best chance. That's what I'm all about. Like, that's why I always talk about things like charting and stuff. It's just to give yourself the best chance of doing a good job and being asked back. That's literally it. It's a tool to be used. So, yeah, I'd say talk to the MD or whoever it is that is going to be sorting out what the music is. Maybe it's the artists themselves, depending on the situation. So there's that, but also what I would ask whoever that person is how the show is going to be run, and specifically what your responsibilities are. So for me as a drummer, that might include using acoustic drums and or electronic drums. It might be a hybrid kit. It might be fully electronic, like with Tom Bailey from the Thompson Twins. That was fully electric. With Howard Jones, fully electric, but a stand-up bespoke kit that I helped create. So that was a conversation that we had. That was it was not a static thing. Here is what your job is. It isn't just a one up, one down acoustic kit. It wasn't the thing. Also, if you're running playback, if you're expected to run playback on the shows, find out what that is, what that role is, what the program is that is going to be used. Make sure that you obviously know that program. If you want to ask the MD or whoever, can we just sit down for a few hours, you can show me exactly what to do, fine, all of that. It may be that the MD themselves are running the tracks. You want to ask about things like, are we on clicks? Obviously, if you're on track, then yes, you will have clicks. Also, especially when it comes to like drums, this is the same for keys, I suppose. Like, what lines do you want me playing in the different songs? So this is once you've obviously listened to the material. So there does need to be an open dialogue with whoever is running the show, just to make sure that you are practicing the right things. I always feel for synth players, actually, or keys players, because especially with modern music, to me, to my ears at least, it's not always obvious what their parts necessarily may be. I know as well for bass players, often you will find bass players will have their electric bass, but they will also have say a synth or a Moog or something like that, that will be a synth bass. Sometimes they're expected to play that. So again, all these things need to be spoken about. Like I say, I don't think any gig I've ever done has ever been like the same. I think every gig I've always done, there's always been a different element, something that is sort of like, often that's the reason I say yes to gigs, to be fair. If there's something that I'm like, oh, I haven't done that before, I want to do that, yeah, let's do that, that sounds fun. That's often the thing that will draw me to a gig most. But yeah, it's definitely worth upfront, just so that you can get a picture in your mind of, well, first of all, you know what you need to be learning, and it might not be just material, it might be systems, like I say, like say you're using Ableton and you've never used Ableton before, well, you better learn, because yeah, you're going to need to know. Yeah, so I think it's just good, so you can get, at least for me, it makes me feel more settled, because otherwise I get anxious and I think about all of the different versions of things. And back in the day, I would not ask the question. To this day, I find it very hard to understand my logic, but there was logic there that, and this is going to sound ridiculous, but I think it's how I was thinking at the time, that by asking questions, two things. First of all, it meant I was inexperienced. No, three things actually. Inexperienced, unprofessional, which is the absolute opposite of what that means, and also that I was being a burden to that person. Like, they've got enough on their plate to be dealing with without me being like, hi, so what's this and what's that? But actually, it's completely the opposite. And in retrospect, I remember people would, like MDs or whatever, would reach out to me leading up to rehearsals and be like, uh, are you cool? Is everything okay? And I'd be like, yeah, I'm just learning the songs. It's all good. Like, I've got it in hand, sort of thing. And they're, oh, okay, because I haven't heard from you. And I'm like, yeah, I was just getting on with it. And I thought me being silent was me being professional, but actually it was causing a little bit of probably stress from the musical director side of like, is she actually doing the work? So yeah, weird things that we think, before you have experience, you just think, oh, that's what people do. Don't make a fuss. La 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 la. No. Just clarify. And it was only when I got older I realised actually the more questions the better. Not just because it comes across as, oh, this person's invested in making sure that they know what's happening, but also like for me it makes me less anxious because I can visualize what is going to happen during like rehearsals, for instance. And I always remember that I've stated this conversation before in other episodes. I always remember the best question I ever asked the MD for The Voice Kids was, talk me through how rehearsals run. I need to actually have in my mind an image of what I should expect, like how does it run, because I knew that it ran quick. And so he talked me through exactly each stage of like learning one song, because we were doing one song at a time, and it was so speedy. I mean, when I tell you, we would sometimes spend maybe 20 minutes on a song and then you move on until you get into the actual studio filming. Like, that's how quick it would run, just because of the sheer volume of songs. So there had to be a very precise system play across the whole of the band for it to run like a well-oiled machine. And it was fantastic. It was like my dream in terms of like efficiency. I love efficiency. It is the saddest thing. I'm such a geek, but I don't care. Efficiency is so cool. I love it. I absolutely love it. So anyway, I would definitely clarify beforehand these things, like what is expected of me, what is the material, what versions of the material, how are rehearsals going to run, how is the show going to run. Some of these questions won't have answers yet, and they'll still be being sorted out, and that's fine. But the fact that you're asking them makes it just adds to your professionalism, to be honest. Also, things like in-ears. Are we on in-ears, or are we on wedges? What's the situation with that? If you're doing a tour and it's abroad specifically, are we renting in gear or are we taking our gear? That's also very, very useful to know, because if you're using electronics, say, as a drummer, are we renting in a unit or am I bringing mine? Because if you're renting in a unit, some units are easier to get hold of than others, for instance. So I used a 2-box for a while. Great little unit, hard to rent in. However, DTX Multi 12, easier to rent in. A Roland SBSX, much easier to rent in, because it's just the way it is. So, but you can sometimes travel stuff. Is it possible to travel stuff? Because that costs money, obviously. It's an extra bag to check. All these things. It's good to kind of like just ask the question. And like I say, there may not be an answer, but it's good to ask. And I'm just realizing this probably feels like a lot of information, and it probably is. But yeah, just feel your way through it. Ask those questions and see what comes back at you, and you will deal with it. This is the thing. This is part of the reason that I feel musicians that are successful, they're able to adapt very effectively. Maybe not quickly, it doesn't need to be quickly, but just effectively. So if you get that new information, you're able to act upon it and be like, all right, cool. All right, I know that I need to, for instance, if I was solely using the 2-box unit and they said, oh, but we're renting in, I'd be like, all right, cool. And you can't travel your stuff. I'd be like, all right, cool. I need to make a setup that is a lot more universal. So it needs to be universal pads, external pads if I'm using them, or it needs to be an SPDS or something else. And I can have a conversation with that, about that rather. And that's fine. So I'd say that's kind of the lead up in terms of asking questions and like getting answers about what you're playing, how you're playing, all of that. Obviously, then learn the material. That's good. And I already said that. It's worth mentioning twice. Learn the material, learn the material, learn the material, inside and out, so that you can adapt on the day. Again, adaptation is everything. And just being able to do that well is, and without fuss, I think is really useful. It makes for a much more creative situation within rehearsals. But when we're talking about sort of learning all the stuff, and obviously there probably will be a lot to learn depending on the volume of material, depending on all of your responsibilities on stage, all of that sort of stuff. There will be a chunk to do, and what I'd say is learn it to the point that you're bored of it. And I don't mean that in an uninspiring way, but what I do mean is that it means that you just know it so well that you're like, cool, this is just part of me, it's just something that I do. And then that leaves room for changes during rehearsals, as well as bringing performance and energy to it, because you have the capacity to, if that makes sense. When it comes to leading up to the actual rehearsals, like let's say the week before or the few days before, I'd say please try, if you're able, to leave a buffer of time, like a day, 2, 3 days even before rehearsals start, where you can just switch off. You can relax, you can do some self-care things, you can, make sure you're getting early nights and sleeping well. Sleep will solve many things in this world, I feel. And make sure that you're eating right, make sure that you've kind of made space to, cook for yourself and not be having rubbish, you know what I mean? Just like take the time to think about it, rather than just getting there and being like, oh my God, I'm starving and all I have are like I just looked over there, a thing of Pringles, so I'm going to have that for my dinner. That's not going to be good for concentration. You're going to crash pretty quick if you haven't already. So I'd say make sure that you're sort of like eating well, sleeping well, have, relaxing activities. If you work out, make sure you're still working out and just being healthy, essentially. What I'd also say is do not book any gigs the sort of like nights before. I would not book gigs, basically the way that I work, because I'm extreme. I'm definitely extreme. I like to hyper-focus. I don't know whether you've noticed. I make sure that if I will block out time for practicing songs and stuff leading up to rehearsals, and whatever that amount of time is, whether it's 2 weeks or a week or maybe longer, sometimes I will give myself a month. And that doesn't mean that I'm practicing every day for a month. It's a more gradual thing. If I have the time, I will do it in a gradual way that is kind of not as stressful, because if I have that, gift of time, I'm going to use it. But I make sure that I don't book in any other gigs in that time, even if they're what I mean is, even if they're covers gigs with people that I've played with 100 times before, that I know the songs inside and out, I still will refrain from booking anything in, because it's a completely different mindset for me, like going off and doing a one-off show, driving for 4 hours, doing a show, coming back again. That takes out so much of my time, my energy, my ability to take on new information. Like, there is a knock-on effect, and I know that about myself. And I think most people are the same, but you will know more about yourself than I will. So just be wary of it, be mindful of it, I think is the right word. So I'd say book out that time. Don't take on any other work if you are able. Obviously, if you have to, that's that. This is all like an ideal world situation. And in an ideal world, I will take off the day before, for sure. I will hopefully take off 2 or 3 days before and just really relax, don't play. I will run the set maybe once the day before rehearsals, just before I pack up all my stuff, just by way of ritual of like, I've done it, so I know that I've done it. I don't need to kind of like worry, oh my gosh, I haven't played the set in 3 days. I'm like, no, I played it yesterday, I ran it, it's fine, I feel fine about it. I will never feel like I'm fantastic, but I'm like, no, I feel good about it, because I'm like, I know it's fine. So then we come on to the actual rehearsal days. And again, this will depend highly on the size of the production, the size of the gig, what you're doing, whether it's a tour, whether it's a festival, whether it's a one-off gig, whether it's arenas, whether it's clubs, it doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, but it does change. So for instance, if it is a big sort of like arena show tour, or let's talk about Cher Lloyd. That was a good one. So that was, what size shows were we doing? It was like O2 Academies, I think. Was it? No, it wasn't. It was bigger than that. So we started off at Cliffs Pavilion, and then we were doing like the Indigo 2 and places like that, I think, if I remember rightly. My memory is shocking, it's unbelievable. So the first day of that, and it was very much like everyone's on in-ears, it was very pop, very pop, the most pop of pop gigs for me. I think that I've done, I'd say it's probably the most poppy gig. I was on a hybrid kit of electronics and acoustic drums. I was running playback off of HD24. So the first day going into rehearsals was very much just setting up, everyone meeting each other. Like, I knew the other band members from other things, so that was cool. Oh no, did I? Yeah, of course I did at the beginning. There was one other person that joined later on. But it was meeting the crew and getting to know them and setting up, and like the drum tech was learning my gear as I was setting it up and marking it up hilariously. Bless him, he marked it up with the most fluorescent pink tape that you've ever seen in your life, and overmarked it up, so it literally looked like a fluorescent purple kit. And the MD was like, dude, what have you done? You can't we can't have that as your marks. Like, that looks ridiculous. I was like, oh, it was very funny. But anyway, poor guy. It was a bit of a complicated setup. But anyway, so yeah, that first day, often, if you're in that kind of level of gig, it's just going to be setting up the stuff, getting a sound, getting a mix on your ears, and obviously there's a whole bunch of people. The artists will not be there on that first day, 100% not. They're not going to be waiting around just for, us all to get a sound. So again, it's just very much everyone figuring not just the gear out, but their setup in relation to everyone else's setup. And there will have been conversations going on before this where you will send over what your spec is, what you're playing, like what your, how many drums you have, what electronics, is it left and right out, or is it multiple outs, things like this that will become apparent just for the front of house engineer, for the monitor engineer, so that they know what they're dealing with, how to bring it into their board, if you like, so they can create mixes. So there will be some information that you will have coming in and need to give coming in. So like I say, what instruments you have, how many guitars do you have, how many different guitars, what pedal boards are you using, all that sort of stuff. So that will have been done beforehand. Should have mentioned that, but there we go, here we are. But yeah, everyone will be just sort of finding their space and just feeling out each other. And again, like I say, that can be instrument wise, and that can be also personally. It's all about creating those relationships, just meeting people, helping each other out when you can, giving each other space when they're trying to set their thing up. Things just take time, they do. And sometimes this can be a full day before rehearsal starts, and you might play a couple of songs just roughly so that you can get a sound. But sometimes it will be half a day of setup. Or sometimes, if you're in a really nice situation, everything will be set up for you the day before, and you will turn up on the first day of rehearsals, which will be from when you start actually rehearsing the songs. So anyway, that, like I say, that is a very specific scenario that I'm talking about, which was the Cher Lloyd situation. So that's what we did on that first day. And like I say, yeah, just setting up, played a few times through, just got a sound in our ears, and a sound for the guy out front, and yeah, that was pretty much it. And like I say, this was a nice situation. We had budget, so we actually had the time to do these things, but sometimes you don't, and that's fine. But the thing remains the same. It will be setting up your gear, getting some sort of mix together in your ears, in everyone's ears, and just playing through the songs very, very briefly, very roughly, just to get a sound together. So that's that. But then when you actually get into rehearsals, the way, as in when you start rehearsals, the way that it will often run is there will be one person leading it, and that will be the MD, hopefully. Sometimes it's the artist. I prefer it to be the MD because there's a better overview, in my experience, of what the whole sound is. And it's even better if they're not actually in the band. I find that is even better, because sometimes it can be difficult. In fact, no, that's not true, actually. That's not true. No, I retract my statement. There are benefits to both. But yeah, anyway. What you will do is the MD, the musical director, will basically take the reins on running rehearsals and what that looks like. So, and every MD, every person has their own way of working. You will find the more people that you work with, the more you find your guys and girls that you love working with. You click in the way that you work. I have a handful that I just adore the way that they work, because it just makes sense to me, and I feel safe with them, and I know that they are allowing me to do my job. Do you know what I mean? There's no stress, there's no like anxiety, there's no friction with how it all runs. It's all very smooth to me. And again, it's just because we think in a similar way, we have a similar way of seeing things and goals and all of that, right? Some MDs completely different, and I find it very hard to work with them, but that's fine. You just kind of adapt and you get on with it. I really hope that that isn't as loud for you as it is for me. There's someone rolling the loudest trolley next to me right now. Anyway, so what that will look like in my experience will be basically running the songs one by one. And often the MD will start with, say, a fairly what they would perceive to be an easier song that, you know, is pretty evident, self-evident. Everyone just plays their parts and it should come together, generally speaking. I'm sure there'll be little bits, but after each song it will be like, oh, cool, yeah, right, let's look at this part. Oh, Emily, what were you playing there? Would you mind if you changed it a bit? Maybe add this, maybe do that. You know, keys player, oh, could you play that line? There's a really cool line in there, actually, if you could cover that as well. Oh, you can't cover that? Okay, fine. What we'll do is we'll put that on track. That's not a problem. Or we'll put your line on track and then you can cover the big synth line or whatever. You know, it's a conversation. It's a back and forth. And it's not about there's never, well, there shouldn't be any air of, you're doing that wrong. That shouldn't be the vibe at all. If you're in a professional outfit, it, like I say, it should be more conversational than that, more creative, more just like fluid. It's more a choice. It's not because someone's doing something wrong. That's I don't think I've ever come across that in a professional setting. I don't think. If I have, I've clearly blocked it from my memory. But yeah, so it is kind of this conversational sort of building the song together as a cohesive group of people, if you like. And again, this can be quite strange at first when you're essentially in the room with strangers. So for me, that's when all my biggest insecurities come out in myself and they're swirling around me and I'm spiraling and all of this. And I often just have to sort of talk to myself and be like, look, you're fine. There's a reason that you're here. You can do the job. This is not a thing. They're just asking you to change something. It's not a big deal. Oh, look, you changed it. See, that's fine. So, that's what I have to do for myself when I'm in rehearsals. And I know that about myself. Sometimes it's just breathing and just concentrating on that rather than overwhelming myself. And then I recognize that, oh, but they moved on to someone else changing something as well. Like, this isn't a big deal. It doesn't mean that you're a failure. But again, that's my perfectionist tendencies coming into play and my struggle with not being perfect, especially when it comes to music, which is impossible. But anyway, there we are. So that's my experience, is that in those sort of, let's say, first few days, again, you may have a rehearsal that is 1 day or 2 days, so this will be highly condensed. But what I'd say is running through each song as a singular song and then just working it up to a point that everyone's happy with what's going on. This can take sometimes less time, more time, depending on the song, depending on the parts, depending on the setup, depending on the people. There's so many different variables, but you've just got to kind of flow with it and just go with it. It will happen. So once you've kind of gone through all the songs, whether that's across a day, whether it's across 5 days, some people 2 weeks, which, I struggle with that. Long rehearsals like that, I really, really, really struggle with. Then what you'll start doing is running the whole set. And that may be blocks of songs, depending on if there are segues. Sometimes you'll be doing medleys. Side note, I hate medleys. They really stress me out. But yeah, so you'll start running the sort of blocks of the show with the segues. And that's to make sure that everything's running smoothly and whatever else. And then you might run the whole show as a full thing. Now, when you start running the whole show, that's when often the artists will start coming in, so that they can literally just come in, the music's done, and then they can put their vocals on, as it were, and come and do their side of it. When it came to people like Cher Lloyd, we had dancers as well. So that's when choreographers come in and that side of things take off. But the show has to get done first. The music has to get done first. And the flow of the show, obviously, because they need to know what songs you're playing. So that's what happens at that stage. What I will say is when the artist comes in, that's when everything can change instantly, and it can be quite jarring because they have a vision obviously, and also they may have past experiences with musicians that impact their how they hear things, how they interpret things like, for instance, I know an artist that was working before with a drummer that was so loud that they were really hypersensitive to drummers, so they would say to me, you're playing too loud and all this sort of stuff. So it's kind of, you have to navigate that in such a way that it works for the artist but at the same time doesn't negate the quality of what you're doing and the quality of the show. It's a hard line to kind of like tread sometimes, but as long as you're kind of doing it for like knowing that at the end of the day this is the artist show, so therefore I will make sure that the artist is happy. Same with the MD. The MD is the next port of call, if not the same rung to me. Like, I need the MD to be happy. It's their vision as much as the artist, in my eyes. So yeah, because the MD is kind of the link between the artist and the band. That's how I see it. So if the MD's happy, they can liaise with the artist. And because that's the other thing, some artists are in fact most are incredibly, they don't like confrontation, they're incredibly shy, they certainly don't want to be calling out anyone, and to us, like, we're all strangers to them. So imagine how intimidating that must feel and how insecure you might feel, especially if you're coming into a room full of experienced musicians, and if you're, say, early on in your career, you might feel a little bit, insecure about that. And sometimes they can lash out in weird ways by, trying to take people down a peg or whatever. That's why it's nice when there's an MD, so they can deal with that and sort of translate it to you, if that makes sense, in a musical way that is like, it makes sense to you, and also without all the energy and emotion. But anyway, sorry, I digress. I don't know why I digressed down this path. But what I will say is be prepared for anything to happen when the artist comes in. Like, literally, I can't tell you how much a show has changed within the space of, doing a week's rehearsals, working up songs and the set, and then the artist comes in and it's like they've just thrown a bomb in the room, and it's just like, and it's like, all right, and again, just adapt. All right, we move, and you make it work. It's just what we do. It absolutely is. So I'd say that is kind of like how the rehearsals will run on the whole. What I also want to talk about, because it's very important to me, is the food side of things, because you'll be taking breaks. It'll be lunch breaks, maybe dinner breaks if you're having really long rehearsals days. In those initial stages, also do ask what kind of length rehearsals they run, like what kind of length days are we looking at here, so you can get it into your head and maybe even start practicing for that amount of time so you're used to being on for that amount of time. Don't overdo it, but just sort of understand the energy levels that you need to sustain throughout, say, an 8-hour, 10-hour, 12-hour day. And then I would say, off the back of this, sort of sustaining energy levels, a huge part of that for me is taking breaks, like going outside and looking at the sky, because often it's a very windowless room and it can get a little bit oppressive, to say the least. What I'd also say is make sure that you are eating well in this period of time. So I know a lot of musicians who, when they're in rehearsals, they will exclusively go out to eat, as in going to get takeouts or go and sit in a cafe and have something there or whatever it is, every rehearsal day. And I can't sustain that. For me, it just doesn't work. That, and they're eating like rubbish. They're eating pure chocolate and like Coca-Cola all the time. And don't get me wrong, I have that stuff, but more strategically, if that makes sense, because here's the thing for me, right? I want to be in the best headspace possible to take on all these things. And often it's not to do with the playing for me. As I said, for me, it's a mind thing. I need my mind to be as healthy as possible, because I am battling it a lot of the time, especially if I'm getting called out to change things, and it's not necessarily a negative thing, but it is in my brain sometimes. So for me, what I do is I will always food prep for the week of rehearsals, for the 2 weeks of rehearsals. I will make sure that I have that food ready, and that includes snacks for me. And I will have, what can I say, like different levels of snacks. There will be more healthy, sustainable energy snacks, but then I will also, which would be like fruit or whatever, but I will also have like quick release sugar snacks when I'm really flagging, and that will be things like chocolate or Haribo or like energy bars or something like that, and that will be a last port of call. But they're incredibly useful if you're really flagging. It's just like, I just need sugared so that I can like survive this, if you like. I'll also make sure that I make things like I make myself fresh ginger tea every day as well, just to make sure that my immune system's up and I'm sort of healthy in that way. And this is where we come onto the heated lunchbox. So, Louis, you've waited all this time. What is it? 34 minutes. Here we are, the heated lunchbox. So I bought this thing. It is so cool. What I'll do is basically, or what I was doing, was food prepping and making meals in, you know, like the plastic Tupperware containers. So it would be like rice and vegetables and some chicken or whatever else, like whatever. Let's just use that as an example. And what I would do is I would have like 10 in my freezer. And in the morning of a rehearsal, I'd take, or maybe even the night before, I put it in the fridge. But anyway, let's say I take it out in the morning and I'd put it in this this heated lunchbox, which basically it's a metal container, and you could put the food directly into the metal container. But what I did instead was put water, a bit of water, not a huge amount, but like say a third filled of water in this with my Tupperware container, food still frozen, and as soon as I'd get into rehearsals I would plug it in, and basically it's kind of like a water bath, I suppose, and it just heats up and it heats this food so that by the time we hit lunchtime I have hot food that is healthy, that I like, that I know what's in it, and it just makes everything so much better, easier, just more enjoyable. I loved it so much. I still have it. I haven't used it for ages, but it's such an interesting bit of kit. It's great on the road as well, really useful. But what would happen was, you know, I would be there with my heated food, you know, sit outside in the sun, lovely, whatever, and the rest of the band often will go off to find food. So I don't know about you, but even just finding food is like, it drains energy from me, making a decision about what I want to eat with the options that are available. But I'll never forget, like, one of the times, it was a Voice Kids rehearsal, all the lads went off to go get, they went to a cafe and they all had baked potatoes with like whatever on top, cheese or beans or whatever. I'm not a big fan of baked potatoes anyway. And I was sat there, little nerdy me, with my heated lunchbox and like eating whatever I was eating. I was so happy. And I thought, I know what's going to happen. They're going to come back, and like about an hour after they come back, there is going to be a massive energy slump as all the blood is rushing to their stomach to like digest. And lo and behold, at like 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, all of them were like, oh, so tired. I was like, oh yeah, no, this isn't good. Caveat, what I will say, there are certain places that I rehearse that I will make sure that at least one of the days I will allow myself to go and do the lunch out thing. 2 reasons. First of all, it's very good for like bonding, morale. It is good, and if you're able to eat lunch together in whatever capacity, I think always do that, definitely. But also, there are certain rehearsal rooms that have fantastic restaurants that I love. So for instance, there's one in Shepherd's Bush, and there's a Jamaican place called Ochi. It's like my favourite ever. So if I'm ever rehearsing at like Bush Studios, or there's another one there, oh, I can't remember. Anyway, I will make sure that I allow myself one of the days, probably later on in the rehearsal period when we're already sort of running the songs, so it's not as much brain power needed. I will go and have an ochi for lunch, and I know I'm going to have the crash, but it's fine. It's so worth it because the food is just so fantastic. So yeah, I think, you know, don't deprive yourself of joy, but at the same time, I think being mindful of things like food, making sure you have water, you're hydrated, having that emergency fund, if you like, of sugariness just in case you're really flagging, you just need to make it through, but try to sort of aim for something that's a little more sustainable and just try and adapt as best you can. What I will say is never turn up with nothing, because there's people I know that do, and I'm like, I don't know how you're doing this, like, and inevitably they're in a bit of a kerfuffle, and by the end of the day, they've lost all patience. And I'm like, of course you have. You've eaten nothing but rubbish today that you've had to go out and forage for what feels like. Obviously, it's not that. But anyway, it's one of those things. So food is a very important part of this to me. And then finally, I suppose the only thing is just after rehearsals. And after rehearsals, all it is about is just knowing what's happening with your gear, whether you're packing up and taking it home, if it's going on a truck to go to the first gig. Again, if you're renting in gear, so that won't be relevant. And then after you sort of have sorted all your gear and gotten out of the rehearsal room, the only thing I'd say is between rehearsals and the first gig, just go through stuff just to make sure that you have it down, make sure that you are so unbelievably comfortable with it, maybe even work on performance side of things, because it's difficult to work on performance side of things in rehearsals because it's a bit of a strange dynamic. But if you want to add that performance element, which I highly suggest, film yourself playing the set and then watch it back and just try and create more of a compelling, energetic performance. I wanted a different word, couldn't find it. I think it's because, again, that trolley's decided to go by again, and it's just like right in my ear. You know, when certain frequencies just hit your brain. So yeah, I'd say just work on performance and creating a great show and bringing great energy to the stage, to the audience, to the artist. And then, again, just take a couple of days before you go out and just relax and enjoy that moment and just be ready for an adventure, basically, and whatever that entails. But yes, I think that's all that I have to say on this matter. I say that, and yet it's like a 40-minute episode. But Louis, I hope that this has answered your question. I hope that this has helped anyone else that is wondering about rehearsals, about to go into rehearsals of this kind of nature. But yeah, that's kind of my experience, at least. And like I say, every gig is different. Every gig is different. I've kind of given an overview of various different versions, but yeah, everything is. There's always something new, and every gig you're like, wow, okay, never done this. Done it this way before, let's go. But I think the number one sort of rule for me is just the ability to adapt. And as long as you have tools within yourself to adapt quickly and effectively, I think is a better word, then I think you'll be all right. And if you're not currently about to do a gig, if you can't even see that in sight, still work on those tools, because you don't want to get to the situation and realise that you don't have the tools in your toolbox to actually execute the job. So things like learning how to chart, for instance, or just learning songs really quickly, you know, learning how to program if you're using electronic drums, or program if you're a keys player, like know your gear inside and out, like know how to create certain sounds, and be able to do the job, basically. That's basically it. Sounds so simple. It's so not that simple, but it sounds simple. Anyway, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do feel free to like, share, and subscribe. If you would like to support this podcast on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/EmilyDrums. If you would like to suggest a subject for a future episode, you can go to emilydrums.com/AMA. And if you would like some one-on-one coaching with me to enhance your career and, you know, go after those goals that you want to be achieving, then go to emilydrums.com and reach out, or you can come over to me on Instagram at HeyEmilyDrums. Whew. Anyway, hope you're having a lovely day wherever you are, whatever you're up to. I'm going to go and have some lunch. That's what I'm doing, because food is everything. Okay. Hope you're having a good day, and I shall speak to you soon. All right. Bye.